truth. With the Empress's fleet came much-needed supplies, thousands of tons of food and fuel being ferried down to Rynn's word to help the surviving civilian population get back on its feet. With nothing left to fight, the Guard and Astaroth's forces had taken to burning away any remaining Tyrannid structures, a thick layer of haze hanging over New Rynn city as countless Tyrannids were burned to ash. Yet despite the carnage, the loss, the people of Rynn's world were in high spirits. And then the student spat in the daemon's face, her very words burning its skin with her purity. An older gentleman said to a gathered group of small children. Away with your lies, O daemon! Mine eyes rest upon the Empress, and only by her word shall we show fealty. And with the call of the student, the Empress came down in a pillar of lightning, striking all of the traitors dumb before she and the student cast them back into the immaterium. All the children gave small gasps of excitement, eagerly hanging to their elder's words as he continued his story. None of them noticed Twilight herself passing by, stepping lightly around the celebrating and mourning groups of guardsmen and civilians. Even with her distinct armor she felt invisible, drifting like a ghost from group to group as she slowly worked her way back to Celestia. She watched and listened, taking in the stories of heroism and terror the humans regaled to one another as they sought to bring some semblance of normality back to Rynn's world. Normality had long been absent from Twilight's life, but there was no need to deny it to others. Ahead Twilight could see Celestia speaking with Corax and a few of his Raven Guard, the Primarch looking more dour than usual. Even when covered in dust and whatever it was that daemons bled, Celestia was still a magnificent sight, her armor shimmering in the evening sun as the wind tugged at her hair. She did not notice Twilight as she approached, keeping her attention on her son while Twilight waited patiently behind her. Finally Corax gave a nod and departed, though he seemed more content to walk rather than fly away with his jump pack. Was it damaged? I didn't see Corax during the fighting, so maybe? Princess? Twilight asked, rocking on her heels as Celestia turned to face her. Is now a bad time? Of course not, Twilight, Celestia said, giving Twilight a smile. I always have time for you. I have heard much about your defense of the northern half of the city. Oh, really? Twilight sheepishly massaged the back of her head. Just trying to do what you taught me to do. And you did so with such skill and enthusiasm. Celestia stepped forward, kneeling and resting a hand on Twilight's shoulder. Truly, I could not be more proud of you than I am now, Twilight. You have come so far in these last few years both in Equestria and here in the Imperium, and you continue to impress me with your skill and knowledge. Celestia's smile turned sad. Unfortunately for me, it has come to the point where you have begun to surpass all that I have left to teach you. But I'll still be your student, right? Twilight asked, her hands trembling as she continued on. I really don't feel prepared for something like that, and I could use all the help I can get, especially with all the weird things that keep popping up around here. There is no need to be so concerned, Twilight, Celestia said, her smile returning in full. And you may surprise yourself with how prepared you truly are. Even for a universe as chaotic as this one, I have no doubt that you will continue to shine as a leader in these dark times. Twilight smiled, though it was a rather uneasy smile all things considered. She tried to think of something to say, to assure Celestia that she could keep up and be the woman Celestia thought she was, but the words continued to die in her mouth. Celestia's warm smile was all Twilight needed. Empress. Twilight turned, spotting Mashes coming through the crowd. He was alone, his face set in a concerned frown, but nothing else about his demeanor had changed. May I have a moment of your and Terra's time? Of course, Mashes, Celestia said, turning to face Mashes fully. What may I help you with? Mashes remained silent, wringing his hands together as he mulled over what to say. Maybe it has something to do with the Eldar? Twilight thought, cursing herself for not bringing this up sooner. The two waited for the Inquisitor to speak, but Mashes said nothing as he looked between Twilight and Celestia. Finally, he sighed. I am not sure if Terra told you of this, he started. But we were rescued from the fall of the spaceport by a band of Eldar Harlequins. I see, Celestia said, her face growing stern. I had suspicions the Eldar had interests in this region of space, but it must be considerable if the Harlequins are willing to get involved." There was another pause before Celestia spoke again. "Please, continue." "They led us through a section of the webway they called the Path of Memories," Mashas said. "Apparently, the psychic energies within draw upon the memories of those that pass through them, projecting them for others to witness." Now Mashas looked to Twilight, her heart sinking as his gaze hardened. "I saw a few particular memories about your student, enough to learn that she is not who she says she is." "Oh no. Mashas," she stammered, shrinking behind Celestia as she continued. I didn't mean to dash." "What do you mean by this, Mashas?" Celestia said, her voice calm. "What crime do you bring against my student?" "The fact that she is not human," Mashas said, looking to Celestia. "She is a Xenos, a pony by the name of Twilight whom I believe you have mentored since she was a child, in some form or another. I don't know how she holds the form of a human, but I presume your power is involved in this." Mashas knew. Mashas knew, and all Twilight could do was cower. Celestia would not let her come to harm, but Mashas knew, and her presence was not always assured. How long did she have before he tried shooting her? Or would Celestia merely kill him where he stood to keep the secret from getting out? Celestia wouldn't do that. Twilight whimpered. Mashas knew, and all she could do was panic. "I see." Celestia replied. "This is a serious accusation you make, Inquisitor. Should rumors such as this persist, it could put the stability of the Crusade and the Imperium in jeopardy, and that is a threat I cannot allow." Twilight felt a brief pulse of magic, watching Celestia's hand clench ever so slightly. "You seek my judgment, no? As Empress, you are more privy to threats I cannot even comprehend," Mashas said. "I want to believe that Twilight is not dangerous. I want to believe that she is an ally, that she has our best interest in mind, but she is a Xenos, and an alien will always put their own interest before that of humanity. That has been the reality the Imperium has faced for the last 15,000 years." Mash's gaze softened, though his concern did not seem willing to depart. "If I am damned, so be it. I just wish an answer from you, Empress. There are few over the course of my life who have ever demanded answers from me in such a way," Celestia said, her eyes narrowing. "To put yourself forward and risk my wrath, even with all you believe. That is a trait increasingly rare among mankind." Twilight looked between Celestia and Mashas. She found her hands clenching, the urge to rock on her feet rising within her. Defenses, explanations, lectures on the dangers of xenophobia, all blossomed and died in her mind without any useful fruit. Just more panic. Mashas knows. "Twilight is not a threat, Mashas," Celestia continued. "She is my student, and she has always placed the good of others before her own self-interest. As of her being a Xenos, they were crafted by my hand during my time of exile, and I am quite fond of them as a result." She raised an eyebrow before continuing. "Is that a satisfactory answer, Inquisitor Velas?" "I accept your judgment, Empress." Mashas closed his eyes. "Do with me as you will. I have no intention of killing you, Mashas," Celestia said, her hand twitching again as Twilight felt her magic draw back. "You have proven yourself to be a useful and intuitive soldier, and the information you possess is too valuable to risk unwanted attention. This conversation does not leave the three of us until such a time I deem it necessary, and should you willingly leak this information, you will die." Twilight winced, but said nothing as Celestia's gaze softened. "I do not mean to be so harsh, but I must if I am to protect all that I love." "I understand," Mashas replied. There was a pause before Celestia smiled. "Thank you for coming to me with your concerns, Mashas," she said. "Now, there will be a strategy meeting at 1400 when the lion arrives. I would like both of you to be there as I have a special task for the two of you in these coming days." Celestia looked between Twilight and Mashas. "Now Twilight, is there anything you wish to say to Inquisitor Mashas before we must return to our regular duties?" Twilight swallowed. She wanted to say something, anything, but her words continued to fail her. Mash's expression had not changed much, but his body language did appear more open. Perhaps he actually wanted to move on and hear what Twilight had to say. "But," he thought, "I was 3 years," she said, her voice low as she hung her head. 3 years we've known each other, struggled together. 3 years I thought you were my friend, that I could trust you, and I did trust you. She looked up at Mashes, a tear forming in her eye. 3 years of trust gone because of 1 minute of miscommunication. Twilight, Mashes started. I know things are different from what you are used to dash. So? After all we've been through, you can't look past the small fact that I am not a full human. Twilight took a step towards Mashes, her hands clenching as she bit back her fear, her frustration. I know how things are here. I know that you and other humans have spent centuries fighting against all manner of horrors and monstrosities. After all that, after all we've done, everything you've said to me and encouraged me with, after all that you thought I was just like them. She trembled, but deep breaths would be enough to keep her calm, for now. Now Mashes took a step back, his face dropping as he tried and failed to meet Twilight's. I couldn't take any risks, he said. So I'm a risk, then? The scared, confused, naive little psyker is as great a risk as a giant hive mind of aliens and a ravenous horde of daemons. She let out a long sigh, just enough to keep from screaming as she looked away from Mashes. I thought you were better than Marcos, Mashes. I thought we were friends. Friends trust each other, communicate with each other, they don't stab each other in the back on a whim. Silence reigned between the two of them, Twilight staring down into the mud as she waited for an answer. It did not matter if it was from Mashes or Celestia, just anyone talking would be fine, at the very least, it could give her someone to vent it. Mashes said. I'm sorry. Twilight raised her head, looking at Mashes out of the corner of her eye. I'm sorry that my accusation has caused you distress, and, well, it's probably shot our working relationship to the warp, all things considered. I wanted to give up on zealotry and caution, really, but I could not. For that, for not sticking to what truly matters for the Imperium, I am justly blamed. Twilight turned her head fully towards Mashes. I am a soldier of the Imperium, and my duty is to protect it from all possible threats, Mashes continued. In seeing you as a threat, especially after all that you've done here. I was wrong, and I am sorry. Mashes closed his eyes. I pray for your forgiveness. Twilight blinked, turning more to face Mashes. She fought the dual urges to chew her lip or get back to venting, her hands trembling as she struggled to speak. That Eldar had spoken at length about what she was willing to give up, perhaps it had challenged Mashes as well. Thank you, Mashes, she said finally, sighing as tension flowed out of her. It really means a lot for me, to hear you say that. Mashes nodded, another pause reigning before he looked to Celestia. Empress, he said. Are you sure you will be needing my assistance? Battling chaos is not exactly in my area of focus. I do not need you as a warrior now, Mashes, Celestia said. A guardian of secrets, perhaps, but not a warrior. The Inquisitor seemed comfortable with this, if a nervous expression and a flex of his mechanical hand could be seen as comfortable. Twilight said nothing. The revelations of Mashes were still ringing in her head, even if he was willing to let it pass, and Celestia was ready to keep it that way. She looked at him, still keeping her eyes averted to avoid direct eye contact, as if she expected to see the same man she had known in days before. All she saw is an Inquisitor. That, Twilight could not accept. Eldar. Celestia had wondered when they would begin to make their presence known. They always seemed to stick their noses into her plans, for better or worse. But that was before they had started to seek Twilight out, if Mashes' comments were any indication. The Inquisitor was also a problem. A good man, perhaps, but just a man when all was said and done. Keeping him close to Twilight could deter him or others from prying too much, but it was yet another factor that she needed to keep an eye on above all others. And that was before factoring the Eldar, and their interest in Twilight. Twilight stood off to her left in the battered amphitheater Celestia had picked for her meeting. She had said little since the meeting with Mashes, shying away from all eye contact as she made herself as unseen as possible. Celestia had hoped for more time to speak to her, to assure her that everything would be all right and get assurance that she would be able to move on, but Twilight would not say anything. Not that Celestia could blame her. Not with all that had happened. The object of Twilight's distress was seated far to Celestia's right, head down. Celestia did not need a mental probe to sense Mash's fear and shame, a constant struggle that rose and fell every time he glanced up at her and Twilight. She would let him have his moment of shame, and then he would need to return to serving the Imperium. All that remained was for Twilight to accept his trust once more. A shimmer to her right heralded Corax's arrival, the Primarch stepping out of the shadows before speaking. "The lion will be here shortly," he said. "I sense Terra is distressed." "Matters have changed, Corax," Celestia said. "However, it is not my place to say more on the matter." Corax nodded, turning slightly as he watched the entrance to the amphitheater. As if on cue, the lion appeared, flanked by 2 champions from among the Dark Angels. He was battered, dried blood caking around deep rents in his armor, but he strode with confidence down the steps towards Celestia, his head held high. The fact that he was carrying the severed head of a Tyranid swarmlord probably helped him keep face. "Johnson," Celestia said. "I thank you for joining us, and congratulate you on your victory over the Tyranids." "Such as it is," Johnson said, dropping his trophy at Celestia's feet. "The insect proved difficult, but I managed to strike it down before the rest of the fleet suffered its end." "Impressive," Celestia said, giving Johnson a smile. "I have no doubt there will be greater victories to be had in the coming days." "No doubt." Johnson looked to Celestia's left, regarding Twilight for a moment. The lion's jaw twitched, as if he were about to say something, but the moment passed before he looked back to Celestia. "We are assembled. What is our next objective?" "That is a most difficult matter," Celestia said. She raised her hand, light shimmering around it before her magic constructed an image of the galaxy. "The Hive fleet is dead, struck down by an enemy I have never faced before. It calls itself the Dark God, and I believe it is a great manifestation of the ruinous powers. I traversed the Eye of Terror several times during my exile," Corax said, frowning. "I have heard no mention of this Dark God anywhere." "I know," Celestia replied, looking to her sons. "Which means it is far more ancient than anything I have faced, ancient enough to have been forgotten entirely, or it is a new god of chaos rising to take the place of the old. Either way, it must be killed." "Why have you not done so already?" Johnson asked, folding his arms across his chest. Celestia hesitated, her free hand twitching ever so slightly. "I cannot, not yet," she said. "This creature's power is in ascendance, drawn by Lorgar's preaching and sorcery. In time I will be able to challenge it, but we must break its power before it can cause too much damage." Johnson gave a grunt, but his silence afterward was enough to say he understood. With the Hive fleet struck by this dark god, no doubt other factions of the traitors will be massing under its banner. Celestia's image shifted to a fortress world, a world ringed almost entirely by the Eye of Terror. "Most likely they will breach the Kadayan Gate and advance southward for Terra. Your task will be to make sure they do not get there. It sounds like you are resigning Kadaya to destruction," Corax said, frowning. Celestia gave a heavy sigh and dismissed the image. "I must take in all possibilities, Corax," she said, hanging her head. "Kadaya may stand, or it may fall. We must be prepared for all possible outcomes, no matter how unsavory they may be." Corax fell silent. Celestia waited for several more moments before speaking again. "If possible, you two are to fortify and hold Kadaya at all cost. Should that not be possible, the traitors must be contained within the Segmentum Obscurus. Choke points at Agrippina, Fenris, and Armageddon should be sufficient for that task." "Us?" Johnson asked. "You will not be leading the defense." Celestia hesitated. A full dossier on the Eldar's presence would only raise more questions from the Primarches than she was willing to answer, and with time as narrow as it was they could not waste any with suspicion or questioning. "No," she thought. "That is what the old me would have done. I cannot allow my sons to fall to confusion and mistrust again. I must return to Terra," Celestia said finally. "From there, I intend to use the old webway portal within the Imperial Palace to find the Black Library. There are questions I have concerning our enemy that perhaps only the Eldar can answer." "Are you sure bringing the Xenos into this matter will be worth it?" Corax asked. There is little love between us and the Eldar, and bringing them in may only see more of our people killed for their schemes. Rushing forward blind will have a worse result. Celestia countered. At the very least, I might be able to convince some of the Eldar we share a common enemy in this dark god. There was a pause, Celestia's gaze drifting until it fell upon Mashes still seated off to the side. Inquisitor Mashes, you can stop hiding now. I have a task for you and Terra. There was a pause before the Inquisitor rose and crossed to the others, keeping his head down to avoid eye contact with Celestia or the Primarchs. You summoned me, Empress? Mashes asked. I have transferred a special package over to your ship, Celestia said, giving Mashes a small smile. You and Terra are to take it to the planet of Solemness and trade it for the unbound flame, which is in the possession of the Lord of Solemness. When you have collected it, bring it to me on Terra. Mashes had already started to pale as soon as Celestia had said the word Solemness. He massaged his head, nervously looking between the Primarchs and Celestia as he struggled for the right thing to say. Are you sure you would not prefer to execute me now? He asked. Corax and the lion looked to Celestia, eyebrows raised. Please don't ask me. I do not send you to Solemness to make war, Inquisitor, she said, turning her focus fully on Mashes. You are merely there to bargain for the unbound flame. With your resources and Terra's talent for speaking to those who would not otherwise listen to reason, I am sure you shall secure the artifact. Celestia looked back to Twilight, the girl flinching away as she continued. Is that something you think you can handle, Terra? Why yes, Twilight stammered, thumbing the hilt of her sword as she continued. I think I can. Good. You two will leave immediately. Twilight swallowed, but nodded and moved to leave as Celestia turned back to the Primarchs. Now, onto the matter of the next stage of the campaign. A moment, student, Johnson said, Twilight stopping and turning towards the lion. I heard of your rallying of the city defenders. A little sloppy, perhaps, but you do appear to have some talent for command, even one as small as this. Oh! Thank you, my lord. Twilight gave a polite nod. The lion's jaw twitched, the Primarch falling silent. What I suppose I am trying to say, he continued, is that I was not entirely correct about your military skills. The Empress was wise in choosing you for a student. Celestia blinked but said nothing. The lion was complimenting a mortal? She could not remember the last time she was witnessed such a sight. Then again, she had not seen the lion in almost 5 billion years. Thank you, Lord Johnson. Twilight said, a small smile flashing across her face. The lion remained as stern as ever. My favor is limited, though, he said. You will have to impress me again if you are to keep it. Twilight gave another shaky nod, stepping further away as she departed. Mashes hesitated, but soon he too left the amphitheater, keeping a fair distance away from Twilight as the two disappeared from sight. A fracture, perhaps, but then Twilight always seemed adept at handling such matters. Empress. Celestia turned back to Corax and Johnson. You were going to discuss our reaction to a possible chaos incursion. Right, of course. Celestia nodded. We must not let ourselves get distracted, after all.